Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to talk about some interesting short form literature from a familiar author, one that I've talked about on this channel before. Today's story is about a Union soldier making a very difficult choice. I am referring to A Horseman in the Sky, a pretty good title right there, by Ambrose Bierce, which was published in 1889. For those who don't know, and I have a feeling that, a lot of people might know who Ambrose Bierce is, but for those who don't, I've talked about him on this channel before. I covered an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, which was another short story that he wrote, which was also really good. Spoiler alert, I really enjoyed this one today, possibly even more than an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. But Ambrose Bierce was a writer, but before that he served in the military during the American Civil War, and then he also was a journalist for some time before he started writing stories, both books and also short stories like the ones that I'm going to talk about today. A lot of his writings kind of lean heavily on his experience during the American Civil War, talking about ideas like duty and the horrors of war, kind of like what Stephen Crane was doing in The Red Badge of Courage. He's pretty well regarded for his work. And something interesting, strange that happened to him was that he told people he was going to Mexico to report on the Mexico war that was going on at the time, and he disappeared in the process. And no one quite knows what happened to Ambrose Bierce, but most likely he probably died. So without further ado, though, let's talk about this short story. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So A Horseman in the Sky focuses on the character Carter Druse. He is a Union soldier who is currently sleeping while guarding a valley in Virginia. The valley is kind of home to a bunch of Union soldiers at the time. If they're caught, they'll all die, and that might hurt the war effort. Carter, he is a native Virginian, which is important to note because he's a Union soldier, but also Virginia was one of the states that seceded. And in fact, that's mentioned in the story that he told his father he was joining the Union Army, and his father said, well, you're betraying your native Virginia, and we will talk more about this after the war. Go ahead and do your duty, but only do your duty, because any more might kind of maybe poison your soul or something like that, which is what I think his father was getting at. But also, Virginia was pro-slavery, so it probably doesn't matter as much if you're betraying it. But that's my commentary. That's not Ambrose Bierce's commentary right there. Anyways, near the start of the story, after Carter Druse wakes up, he sees a Confederate soldier standing on a nearby hill, pretty close to him. And the soldier is described as majestic. You really have to read Ambrose Bierce's writing here. It's pretty wonderful. But Carter kind of has a conflict here. He doesn't want the Confederate soldier finding his Union fellow soldiers because he'll probably tell the other Confederates, and they'll come and either kill or capture them, in the war effort will be hurt there. And he has a sense of duty of shooting this man, and he aims his gun, but he hesitates for a little bit because of the implication of killing another person, but also who the Confederate soldier might be himself. Ultimately, after doing the sort of cosmic calculations, Carter decides to fire, and at that point, it seems like the Horseman leaps off the cliff in an effort to escape this being fired upon. And the story kind of switches perspectives to a federal officer who's roaming about in the valley, and he looks up and he sees a horseman flying through the sky. Whether or not this horseman's been shot or if his horse has been shot, we kind of don't know through the federal officer's perspective. But he describes the scene as apocalyptic, kind of like biblical in a way, because it looks like the horseman is flying through the sky, a figure of death, so to speak. And this officer goes and tells his sergeant, who kind of figures out what happened and goes and talks back to Carter, who tells him that he did fire upon this Confederate soldier. And as the story ends, we learned that this soldier was or looked like his father. In terms of analysis, this is quite a good story. Highlighting, what a lot of authors were talking about at the time, the horrors of war, and, talking about the torn morality that happened during the American Civil War. Ambrose Bierce, for his part, does this by focusing on the idea of duty, and I'm going to be saying the word duty quite a bit, so, get your laughter out of the way now so that we can avoid it going forward. But, Carter is torn between killing a soldier, which is his duty, or at least preventing the soldier from identifying the other Union soldiers in the valley and going to tell someone, and just letting them pass, discovering the people, and moving on. So he's torn ultimately between his duty of stopping someone, perhaps killing them or wounding their horse, as he thinks about quite a bit, because as his father says, he wished that Carter would do his duty and only his duty. So is it his duty to kill this soldier and prevent discovery, or is it his duty to wound the horse and make it difficult for the man to get back to get back to the other soldiers or something like that. Ultimately, Carter just wants to prevent his army from being discovered and word getting out. And he's remembering his father's words in the process. And this raises a lot of questions, like, is it okay to kill one person in order to save many, in order to prevent your comrades from being discovered? Like, you could argue, yes, this is a time of war, and the Union was fighting for a somewhat noble cause of preserving the country and maybe also getting rid of slavery. But should you be able to kill that one person in order to save so many in the valley who might be killed if the Confederates decide to march in and start killing people? It's a bit of a conundrum there, and you could also argue that even one death is too many, especially given that this Confederate soldier might be Carter's father, and you probably shouldn't kill family, as so many authors have argued before. And this also brings up the question, like, how far does your duty go? Because Carter kind of believed that his duty kind of went as far as killing the horse. But someone else might argue that the duty goes beyond that and requires you to kill the soldier too, because this is a time of war, as I've been saying. But I think that's a good question to ask all of you out there. How far would duty during this time go? And if the duty goes pretty far, is that a terrible responsibility to have? Sound off in the comments. It'd be a good discussion worth having. It's also worth talking about the twist ending in this story, which Ambrose Bierce was kind of known for writing, along with O. Henry and a couple of other authors at the time. They really enjoyed their twist endings for some reason. The twist ending is that it turns out that the Confederate soldier that he saw was either his father or someone who looked like his father. Perhaps the guilt of betraying his native Virginia weighs on his conscience, and so every Confederate soldier that he sees is his father. I think you could make an argument for any of them, but the twist essentially is he he killed his own father while trying to defend his comrades. So this is all related back to duty, and like, even if another soldier is family, like, do you have to kill them in order to prevent them from doing their own duty as well? Because the Confederate soldier has to go back and tell someone, like, they're probably a scout, that's probably their responsibility. And so that, I think that's ultimately the twist, and it plays upon like the horrors of war, again, which what a lot of writers were talking about at the time, sort of Bierce getting at the fact that this situation required someone to kill a beloved father figure to them, someone who they really loved. It's also important to consider the alternate ending that I found out was written before Ambrose Bierce kind of revised the story later on. And then the alternate ending, rather than shoot somebody or shoot the soldier, Carter is driven mad by all of the responsibility that he has to do. And I think that really changes the nature of the story, because if he's driven mad, then it shows that ultimately his duty was too much for him, and maybe human beings weren't meant to carry this much responsibility, or even weren't even meant to go to war in the first place. So kind of building off the idea of duty. But in the revised ending, the one we see here, I think it takes a little bit further and says that sometimes you do have to follow your duty, especially as it relates to other people that you have a responsibility for. So again, building upon like the horrors of war, but also sort of a cosmic calculus, like the ultimate like save many and only have to kill one in the process. The ends justify the means, or something like that. So I do think the alternate ending is 100% worth considering as you read the story. And then the last thing that we're talking about that makes the story like really good is the biblical imagery that Ambrose Bierce uses. I think he also uses that in an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. He's really good at building on sort of otherworldly kind of writing and description to describe the scenery around the characters in his stories. And the first way that you see biblical imagery is in the title of the story, "A Horseman in the Sky," kind of making you think like, oh, there's a horseman running through the sky. That's maybe one of the horsemen of the apocalypse. Even the term horseman itself is biblical. Maybe not during Ambrose Bierce's time when more people rode horses and you had a lot of horsemen, but now we equate the word to sort of biblical imagery. You also see it with his description of the regal horseman in the story. When Carter wakes up, he sees the horseman, and the description is somewhat biblical. Allow me to read it to you here. On a colossal pedestal, the cliff, motionless at the extreme edge of the capping rock and sharply outlined against the sky, was an equestrian statue of impressive dignity. The figure of the man sat the figure of the horse, straight and soldierly, but with the repose of a Grecian god carved in the marble which limits the suggestion of activity. The gray costume harmonized with its aerial background. The metal of accoutrement in comparison was softened and subdued by the shadow. The animal's skin had no points of highlight. And that quote is very fascinating because it's sort of describing the Confederate soldier as majestic, seeing the silhouette and seeing the figure outlined against the sky. But the way he describes him is he uses the term like aerial background and colossal pedestal, and even uses the term Grecian god. So maybe not 100% biblical, but otherworldly. But the terms that he uses is stuff that you would often find in the Bible, kind of describing this soldier as like a Greek god or an angel-like figure, and other characters in the story describe this horseman in the sky as just that, like a horseman flying through the sky, as described by the federal officer in this story. And another term used is apocalyptic, again, also used in the Bible. So it seems like this horseman is a harbinger of death to come, or something like that. And then you also have the sort of imagery of a father or a son killing a father, which is Oedipus-like or something like that. But you also see a lot of family members in the Bible killing one another. A lot of biblical imagery packed into this story, and I really think it adds to the importance of the moment. Like the Carter killing this Confederate soldier is something that happens over the course of the story, but within the story, it's about like a moment. Like he sees this soldier, all of this flashes through his mind, and then he kills him or shoots at him or something like that. We don't really get a description at the end, but it adds to the importance that all of this biblical imagery is going through his mind, and it should, like this is weighted. This is important. This is one person killing another person. It shouldn't just be happening all willy-nilly. And I think that's really great writing on Ambrose Bierce's part. Anyway, those are my thoughts on A Horseman in the Sky by Ambrose Bierce. Pretty high quality. I will put a link to it in the description so that you can read it yourself. I definitely recommend that you do read it. If you read any one of the stories I talk about for Short Story Tuesday, this is another case where this is one of them. So you should definitely check it out. Let me know what you think in the comments based on if you read this or anything you have to say about my review here. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this story and this author. I think this is a story that's worth reading and worth sharing with other people. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and horseman-like travels. Farewell.